Hey, I'm back. This is episode three. I believe last time we left off talking about, I believe it was social obligations domestically and how society practically enforces that obligation, how society puts you in a contract, whether you like it or not, and you're expected to follow those rules. So we talked about it domestically. We don't want to go into the foreign talks yet when it comes to morality. We still want to keep it domestic, but let's touch on objective morality from a Judeo Christian thought, because as I believe, if God is real and God does exist and He is the maximal and ultimate good, then in that case, that would mean that practically, um, well, I mean, how would I put it? That would mean that morality would be objective. Um, there would so if this God is the greatest maximal good, this God is the Omega. He is the beginning. Sorry, Omega and Alpha. He is the beginning and the end. The Word was God, and the Word was with God, and so forth. And this God transcends, there's a lot of views, but let's say this God transcends time, right? We're talking about the God that is the first initial cause, as to why we have what we have right now, as to why we exist, why we have souls, why we're able to comprehend and think the way we do. It's why we stand out separate from all other creatures that were created. So, in that case, if this God was to make a decree, now a decree we're going to say is something kind of like a ruling. Now, a decree that God makes is going to be absolute. Now, God is going to make some kind of moral decree, such as uh, if you lust after a woman in your heart, then you have practically committed adultery. So we can get from that adultery and lusting after a woman, being entangled in some kind of sexual intimacy outside of marriage, we can start to extrapolate that that's sin. That's objectively wrong. So there are no circumstances in which, in this case, sexual immorality would be correct or would be permissible. There's no situation in which you stare at another man's woman, you lust after her, and you're not sinning, and that's not objectively wrong. Of course, that's objectively wrong. I mean, where else are we going to go with that? It would also be, in the same case, objectively wrong if you were entangled in an intimate relationship with a woman. I mean, that's also it. That's also the same situation. It's objectively wrong because God has decreed it so. Now, you might think, well, even if God decrees something and God sets the moral standard, because I am human and because I have the faculties and I have the mental capacity to really, bring forth ideas and innovations, and I can reason, right? I got logic, I got arithmetic, I got all kinds of things that I can do. Why is it that I can't reason on equal footing with God? So why is it that I can't myself establish perhaps something that is more moral than what God has decreed? And that is a whole different subject. I will be doing a whole series on a paper that I wrote, and in that series, I'm going to cover all of those details and everything like that. But um, for now, we're just going to keep it simple, and we're going to say that practically God decrees something. God is the maximal good. God is the first initial cause. God holds all the power. He holds all the knowledge. He transcends time. Therefore, there is no reasoning outside of what God has already reasoned that would be superior to His. Why is that? Well, God would already have experienced or gone through those thoughts that you've come up with. None of your thoughts on morality or rationality or logic would be new to God. So I'm going to say that God has an experience of time in which He lives in the past, the present, and the future. I think we could say it like that. He lives in the past, the present, uh, and the future. But really, what we're trying to say here is God has foreknowledge. That's really what you want to know. God has foreknowledge. God is going to know everything that's going to happen in human history from this moment to eternity. Now, there's going to be all kinds of stuff to go over outside of eternity, or what is outside of eternity. I'm not sure. I don't really know. All that stuff is kind of just kind of stuff I make up. When it comes to thinking outside of eternity, I just make it up. I have some fun with it. I'm not quite yet there to where I can debate on those topics, like people like William Lane Craig can and things like that. That's my goal, though. That's my goal, though. William Lane Craig, by the time I'm ready to debate these topics, is not going to be around. But nevertheless, you kind of get the point of what I'm saying. Okay. So objective morality in the Judeo-Christian sense is a little bit more simple in some facets than the social moral obligations. Now, the confusions can be for secularists or atheists is where exactly they see inconsistencies. They see inconsistencies. There's always a situation that comes up, and I think this came up in one of my college classes, to where we had a writing teacher that brought up this case scenario in which he said the Nazis were coming for the Jews. Other fellow Germans who were, we'll call them good people because, I mean, we like the Jews, all right? I don't know. Do you? I don't know. let's just for now say we like the Jews, okay? So we like the Jews, right? And the Germans, the good Germans, anyways, are hiding the Jews. The Nazis come. They ask the Germans, "Hey, where are you hiding these Jews? Are you aiding and abetting them? Where the heck are they?" And the Germans lie. The Germans lie and say, "No, we don't have the Jews." So this kind of brings up an interesting case scenario, and I'm gonna have to pull up something here. You'll have to be patient with me as I kind of find it. But practically, this brings up a situation where where the Germans were put in a spot where they had to lie, and they did. And now the question you have to ask yourself is there a circumstance in life in which it is okay to lie if morality is subjective? If morality is objective and God has decreed that lying is a sin, then wouldn't this be a sin right here? Lying, even if it was for the right reason, even if possibly I don't go to hell for this, wouldn't this still be lying? And therefore, I would be wrong and sinning. Technically, wouldn't that be the situation? There's different ways to interpret the Bible, and there's different verses that talk about this topic insofar as sinning and such. Some would argue that no, the Bible isn't exactly saying that you can never lie. You just shouldn't lie necessarily as solely for your own benefit or solely for deceiving someone is why you shouldn't lie. Other than that, if you're lying to save someone else's life and someone else's life is in jeopardy and your last recourse is to lie, then lying would be permissible. You wouldn't be going to hell for it. It's totally perfectly understandable. That's one way to take a look at it. But yet, it's hard to have a knockdown argument for this, and sometime I'm gonna have someone on who loves to talk about this, and we're gonna have a conversation. So everybody on here, once I get a few more viewers, can watch it live, kind of a debate between us, kind of a conversation about this certain topic. It'll be a ton of fun. But nevertheless, let's say that we understand that there are some inconsistencies, and there are circumstances in which we have to make decisions that are against the moral decree from God, and we would be technically sinning, yet we are doing good for our fellow men. That's one half, and then the other half says, doing that good for your fellow men, lying in that situation is permissible by the Bible, and you are not breaking God's divine decree. Okay, so in this situation, then let's just split it, and let's say that we're not going to be closed-minded, and we're going to take both into account, and we're going to move forward, understanding both. So there's a duality to our thought here, and that's just how we're going to have to move forward until I kind of get a feeling for what you guys think. Then that way we can come down with some ironclad arguments for why one or the other is better. So I want to share with you what I wrote for the definition of free will. Okay, I then define free will simply as the potential to oppose God. So, so the way to think about it, I suppose, is if you have the freedom to oppose God, and you are not opposing God by lying in that circumstance while hiding the Jews, then you are not wrong. You're not sinning. Okay. Now I know this is about free will, but this also goes into objective morality. Okay. God is inherently good. Any act or thought which is good aligns with God's will. Now, inherently practically means that no matter what, it is God's fixed nature that He is good and He can be nothing but good. Even if we reasoned and we said that, God commanding the Israelites to slaughter, kill, leave no one behind, or the Canaanites and that whole situation, none of your thoughts on that situation would really matter. You can ration all you want, but you wouldn't actually stand in an actual position to debate about this topic. You're not on equal footing with God. You don't have foreknowledge. You don't have middle knowledge. You're not omniscient. You're not omnipotent. So there is no effective way for you to tell if what God's decreeing is practically immoral. You're just not in a position to make some kind of assumption like that. So it is evil because it opposes God's will, which encompasses all the good. So if you hide those Jews and from the Nazis, and you did this for a moral and good reason, it's reasonable, and I think it's good practice to assume that you are not opposing God's will by lying in this situation, and that you are going to be perfectly fine. You are going to be forgiven if you sinned in the first place, which in this case scenario, according to what I'm reading, you wouldn't be sinning. If you are opposing God's will, then nothing which you do can be good. If you can oppose God, you are free with the potential to conjure evil. Humans cannot oppose God if what they do tomorrow is predestined and foreknown, but that's for later. I'll let a little bit of that slip. That's for later. Anyhow, I think you get the gist of exactly what I'm saying here. that's the way that we're going to split it down. We're not going to take any of those other lines of thoughts, as far as the consistencies. We're going to go with that. Is if you are opposing God's will, then you are sinning. So the rules about adultery, the rules about sinning, sorry, not the rules about adultery, the rules about lying, the rules about worshiping other gods, it pertains. You are sinning and you are breaking those commandments or laws when you are in opposition to God's will. Um, Now, I think it's reasonable for us to think that God's will is that those Jews survived and that you did lie. Um, I'm gonna say it's reasonable that when you were held at gunpoint and you had to publicly say that you did not believe in God, that God isn't going to send you to hell for that, and it was not against His will that you wish to live and have your life spared, or in the situation that your family's life was not going to be spared and your family's life was going to be taken, and you had to publicly disavow or say that you didn't believe in God. So we're going to say that that is not God's will, and I think that's a perfectly fine position, and I think that's the easier position to take, is that you have to be in opposition to God's will. Well, who knows God's will? I don't. I don't. I don't know anybody who fully knows God's will. The Bible is the best source that we have to fully understand what God's will might be. So we should heed all of those warnings about sinning, about adultery, about murder, about rape. We need to heed all of those warnings and try to keep those commandments. But if there is a circumstance in which you do not, I'm going to argue that you will know in your heart that you are opposing God's will. Now, personally, I'm not making this a statement, just a thought, just for a thought. Maybe that's what the Holy Spirit is for. Maybe that's what the Holy Spirit is for. Your direct link with God. Maybe the Holy Spirit is going to practically lead you towards a decision, or when I say lead, I don't mean like verbally lead you, but maybe in some spiritual sense, something that you feel, something that or maybe something that you think. But anyhow, the Holy Spirit is going to lead you towards following God's will, and it's also going to convict you when you're going against God's will. So you're going to have an idea of what you've done wrong if you possess a connection with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is active in your life. But as you know, the Holy Spirit is something that you get through baptism. But anyhow, that's my take on the Judeo-Christian thought on morality and objective morality. Now, that simplifies the domestic aspect of morality and objective morality. But what does this mean on the foreign scale, right? What does this mean? Now let's talk about some specific morals, and we can get more into this because I'm sure people are going to question me. I'm sure people are going to have different thoughts when it comes to the Bible. Man, there's always someone who's got some crazy thought. There's always that one person. Okay, but regardless, all right. Where was I at? So as far as objective morality goes, biblically, what was I just saying? Gosh dang. So we were going to kind of the foreign sphere. We're talking about objective morality. Okay, so certain morals in the Bible. Okay, so we know that our Great Commission is to go out into all the world, preach the gospel, and become fishers of men. Our obligation isn't only just to our fellow brethren, it's also, sorry, our obligation isn't just to our fellow nation groups or the people within our nation states, but surely that Great Commission is for everybody on every walks in life, in every geographical location, surely we have some kind of obligation that God has placed for us to go out into all the world, preach the good news. Okay, what happens if there is no world to preach good news to? What happens when wars occur? Um, you have a a disagreement with another nation. You start bombing them. Some amount of innocents are typically going to die. A lot of times that's just how it is. Um, are we in a moral position? Are we defying God's will uh, by practically participating in these wars, even if we didn't start them? Is that the situation? So that's really something to think about. I think Candace Owens is really onto something when it comes with Israel and the Palestinian conflict. And as a Christian, I have to ponder why more Christians um, aren't thinking along the lines of Candace Owens. And I'm not talking about her maybe interesting comments, that some people might call anti-Semitic, or her arguments about I don't know, some other stuff. Let's not get into that. She's I couldn't debate her right now. there's, there's no way. But but anyhow, uh, why aren't more Christians bothered about the fact that these wars occur and that the amount of innocents that are losing their lives are? Why aren't more Christians bothered about the Ukrainian and Russian war? Why aren't more Christians bothered about the civil wars that happen in these countries? Why aren't Christians bothered that a country like Mexico borders them, where people are starving, people have nothing, people barely have clothes, they can't afford the next meal? Um, what 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 ex- what is the Christian thought on this matter? Wouldn't you think that Christians would feel some kind of moral obligation towards doing something for their fellow brethren, even if they aren't part of their nation state? Think about that for a moment. Think about that. So right now in our country, we got these ICE raids going that are happening, and everyone's freaking out. Everyone's spazzing out. Oh my gosh, the ICE raids. All these people are being taken out, and weirdly enough, even though there are some conservative Christians, of course, who are like, maybe this isn't the most ideal situation, but you have some serious conservative Christians who claim to be, like just walking God's path, who would cheer for expelling these illegal immigrants. Now, I'm not going to tell you the moral position to have on illegal immigration, but I want you to think here. Now, for the secularists or the atheists, if their argument uh, was to send all the illegals back to Mexico or back to Haiti, or to just kind of for the United States just to kind of recede from the rest of the world, and just leave the rest of the world to do what they do. We're not their police. We're not their moral leaders or anything like that. We just leave them to their own devices. We just see what happens. Um, but I want to ask you. I want to ask you, if you're a Christian, I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me. Do you feel any kind of moral obligation when you see illegal immigrant women, children, men, both good and bad? Do you feel any kind of moral obligation, any tug on your heart that you should be doing something more? Does it not bother you that a country that borders our country is in this kind of disarray, this kind of pain? I mean, imagine the amount of rapes, imagine the amount of death. Uh, does this not bother you in some sense? Does this not make you kind of think twice? What what why can't we help out? You're gonna say there's sovereign states. You can't just go into a sovereign state and decide their morals for them. You can't just go in and tell them how to live, and that's perfectly fine. That makes a lot of sense to me. But that's really something worth thinking about. That's something worth thinking about. Now, let's do it together. Let's think of some verses that we can pull up, some verses biblically for the next episode, and we'll talk further about this. And we're going to pull up Bible verses that talk about, certain the Christian culture, kind of what God expects us to do, what God expects us to be for our fellow brethren, both domestically and foreign. And then we'll get Bible verses that are swinging kind of the other way, proving that God doesn't have an expectation for our actions towards people who are outside of our nation state, kind of proving we're not the nation's police and we should leave them to their own devices. War is a war, children die, I don't know, women die, right? Shit ton of men die. That's just life. I mean, right? I mean, it's just another day. It's just another day, right? That's really what most people think. But nevertheless, think about that. Let's get back. Let's get some Bible verses, and let's continue this series right here on Christian objective morality. Christian objective morality is a little bit more interesting. But like I was saying, let me finish my thought back a second ago. Like I was saying, if the atheist or secularist was to say, deport every illegal immigrant, and it was rational or within reason, then so what? They have no moral obligation to help those people. They have no moral obligation to care. And unless there's some societal kind of obligation, then who cares, right? Now, atheists and secularists as well. The war happening between Israel and Palestine. A bunch of children have died, a bunch of women have died, a bunch of innocent men have died. But let's say that it's within reason and logical that we're not going to go over there. We're not going to be their police. We're not going to go fight their war. We're just going to leave them to their own devices. A war is a war, right? I mean, what's the difference between losing 5 lives and 1,000? What's the difference? I mean, really, right? I mean, what would it matter? It's not as if human lives have some kind of divine value. A human life is really just another speck in time. We just live to propagate DNA. It wouldn't really matter if the atheist or the secularist was to say it's not rational for us to go over to Israel, and it's not logical. We shouldn't be involved. Then they would be consistent, and that would make sense. But that's the best thing about being an atheist and a secularist. You don't have to worry about those things. You really don't. No one can, in my opinion, no one can call you out on the carpet for being immoral. You have no moral obligations. I mean, so like, what if tomorrow, we started aborting children within 4 months old or 5 months old because we argue that they're not conscious as humans? What if atheists, secularists started doing that? Would they be morally wrong? No. If God doesn't exist, there are no moral obligations. If it's rational for us that we should kill 25% of all newborn babies prior to 5 months old in or outside of the womb, and it was rational for a condition in society that we lived in, then you still couldn't call them moral. You could disagree with them all you want, but you would have to accumulate the power to make them socially immoral. You see, it wouldn't be objectively immoral, it would be socially immoral, which is a totally different matter. Because you have to convince people. You have to have swag. You have to have pull. But nevertheless, that's my thoughts on that for now. Let's talk further about kind of the Christian's obligation out on the world stage, and we just kind of also covered really the atheists and secularists kind of obligations or thoughts or ethics on the world stage. So we'll continue with the biblical one because the biblical one is the complicated one. The atheist secularist one is just it doesn't matter. Who cares? They have no moral obligations. They have no responsibilities. It doesn't matter. But for the Christians, if there is objective morality, then something does matter for the way that they react to these kinds of wars, and it does matter to them how many people die, because every single individual has a value that is inherent and given to them by the Creator. I've enjoyed so much this episode. It's gonna get more fun. I'm getting a little bit more comfortable doing this, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in.